All right, we are back again with a long hiatus from the Elm Street franchise because we got rather sidetracked there with the Saw series because Spiral came out and taking you
Hmm.
back through all of that to
That was
experience it.
fun.
Yep, it was certainly very interesting because I was curious to see how you would take that series considering its nature, but because these films seem rather tame by comparison in a lot of ways, but hey, it is what
Hmm.
it is. But yes, we are going through all the classic horror franchises and getting your take on them. And now we've arrived with A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors from 1987. This, of course, again, the third entry. Following it up, I mean, because we watched the first one, and so you liked that one pretty well. And then the second one, which was definitely very different. It was its own kind of like isolated story from the rest of this one because, of course, just getting done with this one, it's very much going back to the first movie as opposed to really following that one up. Uh, because it wasn't that well received by a lot of people, and rightfully so. It's just a very messy film in a lot of ways. I mean, I don't think it's terrible. I just think a lot of the filmmaking aspects to it are very odd with that previous film. But this one brings it back around. Wes Craven did come back to do this film. I know that he originally, from what I recall, he had more darker storytelling aspects for this one, but of course they kind of reeled it back even more so. So it's not all 100% probably his vision, but he did have more, going on with this one. So it is still Wes Craven's baby, so to speak, with this one. So yeah, just jumping right into it, how you feel walking away from Dream Warriors.
It was. I know I caught myself saying this is kind of weird, or okay, that part was kind of cool, or that effect was kind of cool. Um, but yeah, I was kind of nodding along with what you were just saying, that it was weird, messy, like almost disjointed, you could say, but
Well, more so like with the second one as well.
yeah,
But
yeah,
yeah,
it's almost like the second one didn't happen.
yeah.
I mean, aside from her mom dying in her sleep, I mean that's the only like reference, I guess, and then obviously Nancy being the only one. So, because I was like, wait, I mean, I know it's been a minute since the second one, but wasn't she like in that dream that he kind of like took her away or whatever, and then
Well, I mean, what? Yeah, like that was the thing with the first movie is that I mean, it was Wes Craven's idea to just basically make that one film and then end it as like with the happy ending. But of course, Bob Shea, the producer on this and all the other ones, they of course, want a sequel bait and make it seem like, yeah, okay, there could be more to come. And so that's what they did. So it was kind of like the compromise ending with that whole thing.
right,
But then that just kind of plays into the fact with a lot of these horror films is that no matter how great a lot of them are, typically they just also just don't know how to end and really like leave it like with a logical ending, like Friday
right,
the 13th especially. I mean, so that's where I would go back to like at least with the Halloween films, especially with like that original one, like that was a solid ending, and
oh
and
yeah,
a couple of others and stuff like that. But for the most part, with these types of films, they just end on really odd notes where you just don't really know what exactly happened. Like not necessarily in a good way, where it's just like, oh, I wonder what that means. It's just kind of just awkward and weird. Like, well, I guess that was real or it wasn't. I don't know. This one ends pretty normally, but for the most part, it's like, yeah, with that original one, it was a very oddball ending. And so, like I said, this is very much more of a direct sequel to the first one, where that second one just feels like a sidestep story, where
yeah,
the only real reference was that it was Nancy's house, it was that original Elm Street house, and they said that she had left a journal behind, which in the original one, it's like, we don't really see any aspects of a journal, but it's just like, I guess you just gotta try to have those ties to that first movie.
yeah.
So you could just really much skip that one and just go straight to this one. But as far as like bringing her back into the story, it works well and it makes sense because this is dealing with a group of kids, like how a lot of horror films would work. And so you have all these, these misfit types, dealing with their issues and sleep deprivation, and so you have all that going on, which features mainly a young Patricia Arquette in her first film role, which how it usually goes with a lot of these people, even a young Larry Fishburne as opposed to Lawrence Fishburne. So how do you feel about seeing a young Patricia Arquette, and how do you feel about her character most of all?
Well, I can't say I was ever a really big fan, but I suppose she did a good job. I mean, everybody starts somewhere. And yeah, I caught myself laughing at that too. I'm like, nah, that's not. Oh well, okay, yeah, it is Larry, huh? And then red pill, blue pill, and that whole thought.
Yeah, see,
kind of
that's
played into that.
Yeah, see, again, it's just so funny because you realize that, because most actors would write off, be like, oh yeah, I did that stupid little horror film back in the day. But I'm like, you look at this one again and you realize, just how many people really do get their start. A lot of well-known actors at this point doing a horror film. We had Kevin Bacon in the original Friday the 13th, and of course Jamie Lee Curtis in the original Halloween. This one you have even though it's the third entry. The first one you had Johnny Depp, and then this one you have Larry Fishburne and Patricia Arquette. It's so many people. It's just funny.
But what I thought just, a second ago, thinking about him and then The Matrix, was he kind of really turned out to be a dream warrior.
Yeah, that's why I said I'm like, it really, because if you look at it, it plays on those identical themes of because they talk about the dream state, and then you're brain
Except there's
mentally
no such,
just
machines things going on.
Yeah,
here.
you're just stuck in this weird state and weird visual imagery and stuff. And I just realized how funny it would be. But wouldn't it be a great crossover if we had just Morpheus in an Elm Street cross, Morpheus doing his Matrix dialogue
back again,
and just that would. Hell, maybe they could technically tie in some way if you really tried, But yeah, what makes this one more fun is that, again, you have a group of kids who very much have their own distinct personalities. Mm-hmm. And one of the standouts and the fan favorite is Kincaid, the one dude. He's just straight up just talking shit. He just has some of the best, most fun dialogue. Let's go kick this motherfucker's ass all over the tree. And stuff like that. He's definitely a fun one. Would you agree on that?
Yeah, he was. And I don't want to point out that trope, but he and Fishburne managed to stay alive.
Exactly. So I know it's you want to go about this one. I'd be it's two black. It's hey, usually the black dude dies first, as they say. But I'm hey, both the brothers survived by the end of this one. So hey, you gotta give them that. Especially dealing with Freddy Krueger. I'm okay, well, that's cool. Even though his primary targets are the kids and everything, still though, it's just hey, not bad. Two for two.
Yeah.
Yeah. So so kill wise, how did you feel about this one? Were you satisfied or?
I'd say they were pretty tame. Considering all the kinds of kills I've seen in all the other movies, the Saw, the Halloweens, and any of the other one-offs I've seen throughout my life, these were pretty tame. The concept of the puppeting that was kind of, the dream walking was sleepwalking. Okay, and then seeing the puppet strings. That was gross but fascinating.
Well, that's considered probably one of the more iconic kills of the series because of how interesting it is. And what makes this one work is that because it's not just him killing them off, it's also him in a sense playing mind games with them in reality, and just having to deal with the adults and them having to talk against them and not understanding the exact situation, which it's a crazy ass situation, but having to deal with that and to really just kind of break them down. And that makes for a unique kill because, again, he just pulls out the tendons and using the sleepwalk element and then just using them as a puppet. So you have a lot of layers to that kill.
Yeah.
And then just you see him in the sky and then he just kind of cuts it and just lets them drop. And it makes for a very standout kill. And so I would say that with the first couple, that and the girl in the television.
Yeah, I was going to
another
come to
iconic
that next.
Kill. Yeah. And what makes that scene so great is that what you don't realize is that Robert Englund made that scene that much more because of the "Welcome to Primetime, Bitch," which is probably considered one of the best lines of the franchise, if not the best, because he actually improvised that one. That one wasn't in the script. That was actually him. He added that bit, which makes it so much more.
And then that's when he pulled her in?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that is pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, and when you realize moments like that wasn't actually written, but he himself came up with it adds so much more charm to that scene, that moment. The whole idea of it is just like, "Welcome to prime time, bitch," and just pulls her in.
That's what I would want if I see him in one of the cons. I want that on my picture.
Yeah, and that just really goes to show like how he just is a great fit for that character. And so you bring back Nancy and having her deal with the new doctor, which is Dr. Gordon, which Dr. Gordon from Saw series.
I know that's
funny because in this one you got Dr. Gordon, you got Morpheus, you got you got Nancy, you got Freddy, you got all that stuff.
You got all kinds of a potpourri of franchises going on.
Exactly.
Or franchises to come.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and even throughout the film, the Gordon character who is, he's there with Nancy and trying to help the kids out, and so he's also seeing this strange figure that's a nun that's giving him hints into the backstory of the whole Krueger and stuff. And you find out by the end it was actually Freddy Krueger's mother, and the whole backstory is that she was assaulted multiple times because she was locked in with all these maniacs and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And she eventually gave birth to Freddy, and so that makes for that much more of a twisted backstory with this character. So how did you feel about that aspect? Did you find that intriguing at all, and playing into the whole Krueger character?
Yeah, I was trying to figure out what was up with the doctor, because clearly he was seeing things because she wasn't there physically. And then the reveal later was crazy, and the whole backstory bit, that's definitely an interesting angle. I mean, like with learning more about Tobin Bell in the Saw series, as the movies progress and learning things, it's just like that. That's a really horrific sort of beginnings, as it were.
Yeah. And like with a lot of these horror franchises, or with most franchises in general, I mean, most people would say that the original is the best, or you may have that one sequel that's about equal or it's better than that. This one, like I would say with Friday the 13th, Friday the 13th really didn't fully form into what it was until part 4, where everything was like firing on all cylinders, and that really solidified what Friday the 13th is. With Halloween, it was already from the start, like that was pretty much the technical peak of like its quality for the most part. You've had sequels that have been very solid, but that original film itself is, in a lot of ways, is yet to be topped.
Yeah.
With Elm Street, a lot of people would argue that the original is the best one, and some people would even say that this is the best one, or at least on equal ground. And so with this one, like I would say Friday the 13th, this one kind of helps build in more into what the series is in terms of having the balance of creepy, yet that Freddy Krueger that can make these certain like puns and stuff like that. Like he can actually, play these mind games with the victims. And as far as the backstory and as far as characters, how do you feel like overall is like a balance of all of that? Because what we'll eventually get to is that it obviously gets goofier. Like they make him a bit more jokey, where they start to kind of lose that balance. But how do you feel overall with the balance of this one?
Obviously, I think it was good. I feel like this one is like a 1.5, like the original and a half, because it's like you've got the background story, and it could almost be its own thing if the first one didn't happen, or the second one, I guess, because you've got the background in it, and then you've got what's happening to these, kids and whatnot. But those two together, like you were saying, almost on the same level. I mean, obviously you're gonna be partial to an original, but yeah, I'm kind of agreeing there. It's like a cliff note, and here's a little bit additional, but there's the story. You could have left it like the first one and the third one in there.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
obviously,
because they even bring back John Saxon at by the end of this film, and obviously, he's just, he's in a bar, he's drinking, and you can see that he's a security guard as opposed to a cop, because obviously what they were saying before is that after Nancy's mom died, that things just fell apart, and clearly, he's just been on a downturn since then. And so bringing him back in to sort of tie that up, and so they have the plot point where, we have to find Kruger's remains and then bury those in order to defeat him. And so that leads to him and the doctor going into the junkyard to get the remains. And then you get this little sequence here where you have like this the skeleton come to life with like the stop motion animation aspect, and this sequence almost plays Evil Dead like.
I know, because I love that.
Especially with like some of the shots at first, like when the lights were flickering on the car lights and some of the camera like moving back and forth. That moment reminded me of Evil Dead. How did you feel about that moment, the whole skeleton thing? Because some people would say that is a bit dated as far as like maybe the effect. And
well, it is nowadays, obviously.
But did you get into that sequence, or did you just think it was a little odd? How did you feel?
Well, I mean, it's odd, but I got into it because I do love the Evil Dead movies. So I suppose for me it worked. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was really weird. But when they said, okay, you have to bury him in hallowed grounds, I'm like, but that's not a junkyard. A junkyard is not hallowed grounds. So I'm like, yeah, good luck with that. He's gonna come back. So yeah, that's where they kind of lost me there.
Yeah, and this one, I mean, obviously, there are sequels and stuff. He comes back, and so they do different ways to defeat him. But this one particularly plays on more like religious themes. And
well, yeah,
like
that's what I'm saying.
Like he had the holy water.
I get the holy water. I get the cross, crucifix. But
which is interesting, and it makes sense, especially playing to the fact that his mother was a nun and all this stuff, and then so it makes for an interesting aspect to it all. Now, as far as like the element of the Dream Warriors and them having these abilities in the dreams, how did you feel about that aspect and maybe certain individual characters and their sort of powers?
Obviously you can do whatever you want in your dreams. That's what dreams are. But I can kind of get it, because to a degree you can influence your dreams, and like you can pick a specific thing you want to dream about. Like, mm-hmm. I want to dream about a nice sunny beach, you know what I mean, and then go from there. So that concept of pulling people in really wasn't all that far-fetched to me, but obviously it's a movie, so they kind of stretched that concept a bit.
Yeah. So like I said before, with like the certain kills and what you said, I can kind of agree as far as maybe the kills seeming kind of tame. Like the first couple that happened, like the puppet kill and even the television kill, those are very stand out and kind of take their time in those moments. It's just when you get to the second half and when they start going to the dream as a group and playing up their powers and stuff, that's where it does feel a little bit rushed as far as like those kills.
Yeah.
Like even the first one with Taryn, because I mean I like the Taryn character.
Yeah.
And stuff, but they do feel a little bit rushed as far as like the needle thing. Like I get that, but then he just kind of pokes her in the arms and then she kind of dies. And then right after that you get the kid and this whole wizard thing, and then he attacks him a little bit, but then he just kind of grabs him, stabs him in the chest. And that was why I feel like probably like the main flaw as far as those later kills is that they do, like I said, it just kind of happen and feel a bit rushed and don't really play too much into the whole abilities as much. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, up until the end where you had Joey and his scream and everything in the mirrors, and all that, again, a lot of that just plays into the uniqueness of this franchise and the effects and the whole imagery and, like I said, what you're capable of doing and what you're not. It just, at least for some interesting stuff. Now, how did you feel about the overall climax as far as where you see Nancy's father? He comes into the dream where she believes that that's actually him, his spirit, and all of that. But then Freddy tricks her, then kills. How did you feel about the ending for that character and the defeat of Freddy?
I kind of figured it wasn't really gonna be him. I mean, seeing all these movies up to this point, you're prepared for that sort of twist. Yeah, I guess it kind of sucks getting killed off, but gotta have some sort of vehicle for getting to the end of the movie and setting up a new one. So, yeah, how else are you gonna kill somebody off? You know?
Yeah. I think it's a decent end for that character. Although what the future will hold is, as far as sequels go, it'll be very interesting once we get to a later film. And seeing your reaction to that one. Of course, I'm not going to say much now, but that will be very interesting. But yeah, as far as this one, it makes sense. She gets a one-up on Freddy at the very end to help kind of defeat him. And, as far as the younger characters, they're being in that moment, it's fairly fitting. And so, yeah, we get to the end of that, and then they have the funeral, and that's when he realizes that Amanda Krueger was Krueger's mother. And so that you get the final shot of him sleeping, and you have the little house, the light comes on, and it's just like, ooh, what happens? And then that's when we go into the credits, and we get the Dawkins song, Dream Warriors, which you listen to. Which is a very popular song as far as, songs made for a specific horror film. It's a pretty rock and roll song, and it's badass, and so
very 80s.
Yeah, but it's a great song though, and it really helps kind of solidify this film as being a memorable one with the franchise and just horror in general, I would say. So final thoughts on Dream Warriors?
Well, I'm just gonna harken back to what I said just a few moments ago, is that you could have the first one and this one, and that could have been it. No knock against the second one, I suppose, but that's like the story there. And then the ending, okay, well, a lot of movies allude to a sequel, but then never happens. So open-ended like that would have been just fine. But yeah, it wasn't horrible. It wasn't super slasher type. Obviously, I don't think he's really meant to be a crazy slasher horror icon like Michael or Jason, because they're just straight up stabbing people. He's more like a psychological, I guess slasher, because he does do a little bit of that, but screw with your head. So, yeah, I guess we'll see what happens in the next few.
Yeah. Again, it's a very unique horror slasher. Obviously, unlike Michael and Jason, which are mask wearers and for the most part human, and just are more limited than what. Obviously, you get your creative kills throughout those franchises, but this one, obviously, you're dealing with the elements of dreams and powers.
Literally
and stuff. So you can literally do anything
Yeah.
that you want to do as far as kills go. And so, yeah, this one is definitely a good peak point for the franchise. After this, the next one, I would say, is a solid film. I wouldn't say it's as good, though some could argue that they could like that one probably the best too. It's pretty decent, I would say. Probably like a Halloween 4 type of situation, in a sense. And then after that, when it kind of goes, on the downward turn. But there is one other standout later on in this franchise, but like I said, we'll eventually get to that. So yeah, all in all, as far as which one I like better, like this or the original, probably this one a little bit more, though they are in a sense a little bit different, because this one again has a little bit more of that certain balance to it, where the first one has a little bit more of that suspense element.
Well, yeah, because it's the first
Yeah.
you're ever seeing of this thing. So
Yeah, so I would say I would basically put it at like a 4.0, just like a good solid entry where you have a lot of fun aspects. You have fun characters. Song is good. Freddie himself is pretty much at the balance that he should be at with this one, and so yeah, you just have a lot of good solid elements to it. So yeah, that'll do it for our review of A Nightmare on Elm Street 3 Dream Warriors. We will see you next time for A Nightmare on Elm Street 4 The Dream Master. So we'll see how that goes. Bye for now.